Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show, and I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you go on a paranormal thrill ride. Oh yeah, we have an exciting guest in store for you. But first, I want to tell you really quick about novelty tins. You see that I have this bookish thing in my hand? It's a tea tin. Isn't that cute? It's all based on different books and literature. So this is Pioki Pan, not Peter Pan, and Pure Rabbit, not Peter Rabbit. So check them out. If you love books, if you love tea and love them both, the noveltytins.com is where you should go. Perfect gift for the book lover on your list as well. All right. Our guest today is Betsey Kulakowski. I got that right?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to talk about the paranormal and how that can inspire writing, how exciting and enticing it is. I don't know about you, but I've always loved imagining if Bigfoot is real, are UFOs real, ancient curses and legends and myths. We just don't know. But one thing that always seems to entice us are books that are based on the paranormal. And that's why we're talking today about books that take us on a paranormal thrill ride. And our guest is, again, Betsey Kulakowski. And not only is she a writer, but she's an avid lover of documentaries and TV shows that deal with some of the bizarre and unexplained things. Shows like Ancient Aliens, Mysteries at the Museum. One of my all-time favorites going way, way back. I think I might be dating myself, but In Search Of, remember that with Leonard Nimoy?
Oh.
Betsey, hello. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So, okay, you have a series. The Veritas Codex is the book series, and the Monk's Grimoire.
That's
Did I
correct.
say that right?
Yes, you
It
did.
is the fourth book in the series. So we're going to talk about this book, but then I also want to talk about the entire series. And there's so much going on here because you, Betsey, are a woman after my own heart. I love the paranormal. And you got the alien behind you, and you've got, I don't know, is that Bigfoot back there?
Oh, yeah. There's several Bigfoots back there.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's start. Why is it, do you think, that people are drawn to the paranormal? What is it about Bigfoot and UFOs and aliens and everything else that just grabs our attention?
I think for me, the biggest thing is I'm curious about the world around us, and for the things that we can't explain, I want to know more. I want to know, is Bigfoot real? I want to know if there are other lives out there. So yeah, for me, it's just, I'm fascinated and I'm curious. I want to know more.
And when it comes to infusing that into a fiction story, give us kind of like your backstory a little bit, because I know you like these shows and you've probably done some research and gone to many of these places. So when you're learning about myths and legends, are you reading and then, oh my God, I have to put that into my story? What's that process like?
Well, I started out pretty young, being interested in the paranormal. We lived in the Pacific Northwest when I was very young. And I remember the first really big monster story I ever heard about was Bigfoot. So I have been fascinated with Bigfoot since I was itty bitty. I mean, 2-3 years old, I remember Bigfoot was my monster. If you're, a fan of the Monsters, Inc. series, that's my monster. So I have always been fascinated with Bigfoot. And then the Loch Ness Monster was another one that I had heard about. So, just growing up in that area and seeing the habitat and hearing those stories, and my grandfather always told great stories, and he always had a yarn to tell. And that's really kind of where I fell in love with stories. But the world around us, I'm just always curious about it. I wrote my first book when I was 6, and I wrote my first poem when I was 7, and it was about the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh my God. Do you still have it?
I still have it. I still know it.
Oh, can we hear it?
Yes. Nessie is big, Nessie is fat, Nessie wants to eat your cat, Nessie's from Mars and plays with toy cars, Nessie the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, that's adorable. I love that. I love that.
I don't remember why I remember it, but it's just one of those things that's always stayed with me. So I have done some paranormal investigations. I've gone on ghost hunts. I'm big into history and genealogy. I've traced my family history back generations. And so, I want to know all the answers to all those mysteries. And so for me, it's just really been a curiosity that has to be fed. And then I'm able to take that and turn it into a book.
Oh, excellent. I love that. So how about if we set the stage for your series? Tell us the big 30,000 foot overview. What's going on in your book?
So it's all about a travel adventure show host named Dr. Lauren Grayson, who's a biological anthropologist, and they're doing a television series called the Veritas Codex. And she is very scientific and very research minded. And she's found that being on cable TV has given her a way to pay for her research. And she has a team that they go out on these adventures and they go looking for these answers to the mysteries of the world, and they turn it into good television. And the first book begins, they're actually down in Peru doing an investigation in a cavern, and they find a mysterious object that just kind of leads them on an adventure, and it comes full circle. They end up later on an adventure looking for Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, because that's my monster. That's kind of where I had to start. I had to go to Bigfoot. So they go on a hunt for Bigfoot. And in the middle of the investigation, Lauren disappears. And she's gone for 10 days and nobody knows where she is. And when she comes back, she can't remember what happened to her. But all the evidence points to the fact that she was abducted by Bigfoot. So was it Bigfoot? Was it aliens? It's a pity she can't remember.
It is. And now I need to know what happened.
Exactly.
So with your books, is it a series, and as each one goes, you have to read the first one in order to know what's going on, or is it more of an anthology where everyone can kind of stand on its own?
Yeah, you really kind of need to start at the beginning, because the adventure and the mysteries grow as you go through the stories with the characters. The second book is the Jaguar Queen, and they're actually going down to Chichen Itza for the Maya apocalypse of 2012, which is about the timeline we're looking at. And of course, they know the world's not going to end. I think we're all, logical people, and I think they're pretty much, scientific based anyway. So they know it's not going to end. But the network is insisting on a show, and they get involved in an international mystery involving murder, kidnapping, antiquities sales, things like that. So that, it kind of builds on the first book. The third book is The Alien Accord, and it's about Lauren and her brother, who is a research engineer for NASA. And they've had a contentious relationship their whole life, because he's always teased and mocked her, and he's always telling her he's going to find aliens before she does. And when one of his colleagues is murdered, it puts him on the path to have to solve the mystery of what's going on out there, and he needs Lauren's help, and he's more afraid to face her than the KGB. But then we get into some mysterious signals from outer space, and they have to solve their problems before they can solve the mystery.
Oh, I love it. Well, it sounds like you've got the personal drama going on alongside of the, I love that.
And there's a love story in there too.
Of course, we need that love story.
What's life without love?
So, okay, let's flash forward to book number 4. Now, this is based on a real document. Is that what you were saying?
It's actually based on a real document called the Devil's Codex, which was written in the ancient times by a Benedictine monk. And the legend goes that he was slated to be walled up alive. And he tried to finish this book, which was going to be a book to include every document known to mankind at the time. And it would be a great glory to the convent, or to the place where he lived. But he couldn't finish it in one night, and he knew he couldn't finish it. So the story is that he sold his soul to the devil, and the devil helped him finish it in one night. So there were pages of it that are actually missing, because it was actually thrown out of a window in a fire to try to save it, and some of the pages tore out and were lost to the ages. And they have to find those pages before the devil does, or there will be hell to pay.
Ooh. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I've heard of that. So that is a real legend, something that they say really happened.
Right.
How much, so talk a little bit about the research process a little bit more. So do you read about something like that and say, oh, I'm going to fit that into my book? Or have you mapped out your entire book line and you're looking for things to add in it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's kind of complicated because I actually started writing this series back in 2009. And when I started it, it was just, I want to write the first book. And I really wrote it for practice because I had written a couple of books, but I just didn't feel like I had it down yet. And I just knew I needed more practice. So this was kind of the prospect going in, as I would write whatever I wanted to happen could happen because nobody else was ever going to read it. So I could make it outlandish and as crazy as I wanted to. Whatever the story needed, I could do because it was not going to be anything anybody would ever read. And that went pretty well. So I wrote the second book, and then I wrote the third book, and then I wrote the fourth book. And I hadn't found my path to publication at that point. So I already had 4 books under my belt when I finally made that connection and found my publisher. From there, I don't write in straight lines. I tend to write in circles. So I don't write books always in order. I decided I would write the Monk's Grimoire to kind of go in with a theme that we were working on after I had already written the first 4 books. And actually, I'd written a 5th book too. So I kind of went back in and I plugged this book in, and I sat down. It was a Memorial Day weekend. I had an idea for the book. I had seen something. I don't remember if it was on the internet or if it was on a TV show that I had seen about the Devil's Codex, but I started doing some research on it. I sat down out on the patio. It was Memorial Day weekend. It was kind of rainy and cold. And I had my iPad in my lap. I had my laptop, I had my iPad, and I had my cell phone, and I had videos going on one of them. I'm typing on the other, and I'm looking at little details as I go. And over the course of that weekend, I wrote half the book.
Wow.
Yeah. And I finished it in 24 days. So, I mean, it was one of those, it was just simply inspired. The story just came to me. By then I knew my characters really well. I knew, what they could and couldn't do. I knew some of the mythos, some of the things that needed to be in it. And I had it done. And of course, editing always takes longer when you do a book that fast. But it was just one I always knew where it was going to go. Since then, I have gone ahead and I've written ahead, and I've kind of always had an end game in mind. I didn't really know how I was going to get there, but I knew where I wanted to go. What I wanted for the characters, kind of not really towards the end, but towards the end of this evolution of the series. And I now have 11 books, either in some finished or mostly finished draft. I'm planning on maybe plugging one more in there because I have a thing about numbers, and I can't do uneven numbers. But if I'm going to do an uneven number, 11's a really good one because anytime you see 11s repeated, that's a divine number.
So, and you don't want to do 13.
I don't want to do 13. Exactly. But it's one of those things that once I hit that apex of the story for this evolution, there's so many different directions I can go with some of the side characters, with the main characters. So I really feel like this is a series that could go on for a while, even if it's in different evolutions of the concept.
Yeah. Well, and you've almost got a series there too for
very much so.
Or streaming. Every book could fit into
a season.
Yeah, were you thinking of that as well?
I wasn't when I started, but lately it's become more prevalent because you see so many books now that are done that way.
Yeah. Well, and the good news too is between Netflix and Hulu and all the streaming channels and all the networks, everybody's craving content. So
exactly,
it's a good time to have a nice, big, chunky series like that. Yeah, exactly. All right. So I want to talk a little bit. You're very humble about your writing and your process and everything. Now, you went to a writer's conference too, didn't you? You want to talk a little bit?
I actually started going to writing conferences probably about 5 years ago. I was really to a point where it's like, you know what? I either need to do something with this, or I need to abandon it because it's one or the other. Well, I also subscribe to the theory that a non-writing writer is a monster courting disaster. And I'm one of those people. This is how I channel all my stress and everything. I just come home and I put it all on the page, and then I can walk away from it, and it's, I can make something good out of it. So I walk through that process, and I have to get things down on paper. So I've already forgotten the question.
I was just asking you about the writers' conference that you went to.
Yes.
Yeah, that seemed like a pinnacle moment for you.
Yeah. So I started going to the writers' conference. It was actually at my college at the time. It was called the Rose State Writers' Conference. And I was a student there. I was working on my degree in emergency management and about to finish up. And this came around. And It has evolved now into what's called WriterCon, and I've gone every year. In 2019, I had a couple of finished manuscripts. Of course, I had the first 4 of the series that were done or mostly done in some evolution. And I had written in my notes, because I'm a copious note taker, that by 2020, I was going to do something. I didn't know what it was, but I was going to do one thing that was going to be worthy of being asked to speak at the Writers' Conference. And I didn't tell anybody else this. I just wrote it in my notes. And that year I pitched a manuscript to one of the agents for a different book that was a piece of women's fiction. And I got a request, ended up getting a request for a full manuscript, which is really big for an author. That's like the first time you know you've accomplished something is when they ask for a full. Mm-hmm. So I got that request, and unfortunately it was a pass. So it was like, okay, I need to take it to the next level. And they had announced that they were going to be doing a WriterCon cruise, which was going to be a week-long intensive at sea. So we'd travel and vacation and do all that kind of fun stuff, but we'd also workshop a book, come up with a marketing plan, practice our writing, learn new skills, all the things that you need to know as a new author. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to send the one manuscript that scares me the most, the one that I never intended for anybody else to see, and let somebody else tell me if it's any good or not. And that was what would become the Veritas Codex. So that was really kind of where I got my path to publication, because that's when I got picked up for a publishing contract.
Oh, that's a great story. And it's so true. When you go to writers' conferences, I say this all the time, it really can just expand your horizons. You don't know who you're going to meet. You can pitch agents. You just get a bigger, more broad understanding of what the market is all about and what the industry is all about. What advice might you have for somebody like yourself? Or we'll do the question. What advice would you give to yourself 15 years ago when you were first starting out?
How much time do we have? Because I have a list, because I get asked this question a lot, and I always try to come up with something different. But really, for me, the biggest thing was getting out of my own way. So I would say never let your dream, or never let your fear get in the way of your dreams. And for me, that was a big one, because I really didn't want anybody to read any of this. I didn't think it was that good. And it was really, the only thing in my way was me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true of so many writers. They get in their own way, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That imposter syndrome is a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you have a day job, and you have done a lot of work. Tell us a little bit about you as somebody who has been there on the front lines and helping people with safety and everything.
So I worked for 28 years for the Oklahoma Department of Labor. I was a safety consultant. I worked for a while as an asbestos inspector. I worked as a enforcement officer. I did child labor. We collected statistics for the Bureau of Labor Statistics on workplace fatalities. I retired and went to work for a nonprofit. But I also got my degree in emergency management in 2018, because I had been on the front lines for the Murrah bombing. Our team got called down to work there, and then got called to the World Trade Center to work with OSHA's National Disaster Response Team. We worked at Hurricane Katrina, and then all the tornadoes that happened here in Oklahoma. It seemed like, we're an all hazard state. So I've been called out to a number of disasters there. So getting my degree in that made perfect sense. And it turns out my professor in college was also a writer, and we write very similar things. And now we are writing partners. We critique each other. We meet once a week for coffee. He'll read me a little bit of what he has. I'll read a little bit of what I have. And we really just are a good sounding board for each other to bounce off ideas. It's like, that doesn't sound right. Or I don't think that character would do that, because we know each other so well and we know our characters. It's worked out really well.
Oh, that's a really neat relationship. I love that. I love that. And it's so true. What I love about you is you're a busy person. You've done a lot. So when people say, I don't have time to write, it's like, look at you and all the books that you've written. And having that sounding board, like you said, whether it's a writing partner or a writer's group, that could be so important too, right?
Exactly. And it helps to be really efficient when you work a full-time job and you have a family and you have a house and all the responsibilities that come with that. You have to be really efficient. So having 4 books in the back already waiting to go has been really helpful. But it also helps if you type really fast. And the last time I took a typing test, I typed 145 words a minute.
Darn.
So I've worked really hard for that goal. It's something that's been important to me since I was pretty young. High school, I think, is when it kind of started.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. I know you've gone on ghost hunts and you
Mhm.
talked a little bit about some of the places that you've been and the paranormal research that you've done. Have you ever seen something or experienced something that was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Again,
okay.
how much time do we have? Because I'm on the list.
Okay.
Probably one of the most interesting, as far as a ghost hunt goes, one of the most interesting ones I've done. We used to volunteer out at Fort Reno here in Oklahoma. It's an old Indian fort. It was here before statehood, which was 1901, so it was 1880s circa. And we went out there to volunteer to do historical research for them. My mother and I both are genealogists, and we really have a penchant for history, and we love going through exciting archives and records and libraries and books and things like that. So we had gone out to help with them. And they started doing ghost tours because they had so much activity that they would bring a paranormal team out, and the public could come and pay a fee, and of course all that supported the historical preservation. And one night we went out before sunset, and I took pictures in all the windows of the old Victorian home that sits on that property. It has a lot of activity. And then when we went back later with the group, I was taking pictures, and if you look in the pictures, there is very clearly a face of a man leaning forward with his hand on the window. You can see the outline of his beard, the darkness in his eye sockets. And I got 3 or 4 pictures of him before he was just gone. And I have pictures of daylight and dark to compare. That window was clean. There was nothing on it. You know, it's a little bit warped, but still, you can kind of tell that there wasn't anything there during the daylight. And we've had a couple of interesting experiences at the old Victorian. We had a window that got knocked out of the window ledge just as my mom and I walked by, like they don't want us here. So I've had my pant leg tugged on in the attic. And so some very interesting things going on out there. And there have been other experiences other people have had, but that was my experience. Probably one of the most chilling for me, because that was really personal, that it's like he was saying hi, you know, he's leaning in to say hello, and I got a picture of it.
Yeah.
I actually had that option by the Travel Channel to be used in a fan episode of Ghost Adventures. I never did see that episode, so if it actually made it, I couldn't tell you. I keep meaning to go back and look for it, but I've never had a chance. And then I consider myself pretty storm sensitive. I tend to have premonitions about big ones when they come. The May 3rd tornado, I had a very vivid dream about it the night before. There was some tornadoes that came through on May 5th and 6th, and I think it was 2012 or 2009. The years start to run together. That I had actually done a safety consultation in that area and had told the employer, you know, you really need to have a weather plan. And we went through and kind of identified the best possible places they had, because they really didn't have a storm shelter, but we identified best practices, you know, notifications, all the things that you need to have for a preparedness plan. And 2 days later, they got hit by a tornado. Wow. And I had a dream about it before I had gone out to do their inspection. So some of that I can use to my advantage, but I'm still not as reliable as the National Weather Service. So I certainly don't recommend listening to me for weather advice. But when I start to have those dreams about tornadoes, I try to pay attention to them. And I have some friends in the emergency management community that are similar. So we usually compare notes before and after storms like that.
Wow. Wow. Now, do you feel that you're sensitive in a way in that case? Do you feel connected to spirits? Is there mediumship? Is there anything else, or is it more premonitions and dreams?
That's probably been the biggest ones that I can actually quantify or qualify in any way. I've gone out to, we went out to Washington State this fall on the hunt for Bigfoot. Didn't find him, but 2 days later, somebody else did. They found a footprint anyway. That was documented in the newspaper. And so, I mean, I think it's really more a matter of being in the right place at the right time on some of those things. The only thing I really know that I feel like I've got some kind of sensitivity is with the weather. And I don't know if that's just a change in barometric pressure, or if it's just, you know, the tornado dreams are supposed to be a sign of change, and maybe I'm sensitive to that. So there's a lot of things that could be at play. But again, I'm kind of like Lauren. I want some evidence. I'll correlate patterns. I'm a statistician too, as part of my job. So I look for patterns, and anytime I can see a pattern, that usually tells me something gives.
Right, right. Well, it's good to have a basis in science and logic, and not just take stuff, at face value.
Yeah. And so, that's something that Lauren uses to her advantage all the time in the book.
All right. Let me ask you about Bigfoot, because UFOs, I'm like, "Ooh, there could be something there, ghosts, spirits." I get the premonition thing. I've done that too. It's kind of scary when it happens. But then I think of Bigfoot. So prove me wrong, but if there's a Bigfoot out there or big feet out there, wouldn't we have more evidence than just the footprints? Wouldn't there be bodies and remains and so much more that we discover?
Well, you would think. We did not discover that mountain gorillas were real until pretty late in the 20th century, because they were in such a remote region that was so isolated from human contact. The indigenous people knew that they were there, but the modern world didn't know so much because they had not seen it. Therefore, they did not believe it. I do believe that there is ample opportunities for such a species to exist, because when we were in the Pacific Northwest, what really moved me was how dense and how thick the forest was. We walked up on deer that we did not see until we were 3 feet from them, because it was so dense and so dark and so thick. So I believe that there's adequate habitat. Everything they need is out there. They have shelter, they have food, they have water. Those are the things that we need. There have been some disputed cases where someone has found a body. They've never really been proven, but some of the photographic evidence is really compelling. Some of it is clearly a fraud. There's a lot of fraud hoaxmongers out there that would try to deceive people, and I don't know what they would benefit from that, but there are people who just think that would be fun. So, I still don't have enough evidence, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
That is true. That is very true too. Okay, so the book series, the Veritas Codex. Tell people where they can go to find all 4 books that are currently out, and where to find you and maybe follow you online too, so that they can stay up to date for the next releases.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everywhere you can buy books: Amazon, Kindle, Kobo, Apple, Google, Barnes and Noble, even Walmart.com and Target.com. You can order the books there. They're print on demand, so we don't print them until we need them. That way we don't kill trees. I'm a big fan of the environment, so let's protect it. I also have copies of it at the Full Circle bookstore in Oklahoma City that are autographed. Anybody can order from them directly or come and pick one up at the store. I've got to drop the new book off. It's on my list of things to do this week. But there will be books there. And there's also an Audible version of the first 3 books, and hopefully we'll have one of the 4th book out before too long. So that's where you can find the books. And where you can find me is I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. I'm author Betsey K on Instagram. I'm at Bakuli on Twitter, and then author Betsey Kulakowski on Facebook. Also the website, author-betseykulakowski.com. I'm sure you'll have show notes where you can put that, because let's face it, Betsey is always spelled wrong, and Kulakowski is just not easy. So
you almost caught me on the Betsey too. I had to look twice because I copied and pasted it. I'm like, oh, I spelled Betsey wrongly.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I get called everything from Nancy to Becky. It's like, yeah, don't call me Becky.
I hear you. Betsey, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really interesting conversation. I love the paranormal stuff, and I just can't wait to dig into the Veritas Codex books. It is such a paranormal thrill ride. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you everyone for joining us as well. You can find out more about us on our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and on Instagram as well. We're on TikTok. And of course, we're on YouTube. Ring the bell so you're subscribed and you don't miss one single episode when we have conversations with wonderful authors like Betsey. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.